Well, hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. We have got another Q&A session, getting so many great questions from you guys. And I hope you guys enjoyed the first one we did, which was in January. If you haven't, be sure to go back and listen to that. We talked a lot about gallbladder. We talked about parasites. We talked about, a lot of things, skin health, skin inflammation. So we covered so much in that last one. So be sure to scroll back and check that out. And of course, joining me, I've got my superstar health coaching team, led by Melissa Knorr, who's been with me for quite a while, 5-6 years. We've known each other for over 10 years now. And she's come such a long way, helping thousands of people literally all over the world. And we've also got the great Hampton Young joining us out of Missouri. And as well as Tara Peterson, the rock star Tara Peterson, coming out of Missouri as well. And these guys are just awesome. They're working with people all over the world with a wide variety of different health conditions. And so if you're out there, you're looking for help, definitely check them out. You can go to our website. You can look up the coaching tab. Of course, we'll have information in our show notes as well. Again, they work virtually with people, so you don't have to leave your home. You can work with them and really help navigate your health challenges. Now, let's jump into our questions here. Melissa, how are you doing?
I'm great. Yeah, awesome.
Right.
I love this. I think this is fun. So I'm glad we've started doing this for our listeners and followers. So first questions from Cindy, and we've got a couple on PMS. So I'm going to add, Tarzan also has one on PMS. So we'll talk about both. Okay, so Cindy says, I have PMS. What diet and supplements would you suggest to follow?
Yeah, this is a great question. And Tara and I were chatting about this before our call. I said, well, I can give, some ideas and strategies and some of the science, but I don't really have any personal experience, of course, with PMS. So I'll let the ladies take it from there. But when we think about PMS, most of those symptoms are occurring right at the end of the luteal phase. So you have the follicular phase, which is kind of the first 14 days. Second half is called the luteal phase. And the second half is the first half is a lot of estrogen, right? As kind of you're kind of growing the uterine lining, getting ready for the ovary, getting the ovary growing. And we know estrogen is very much growth oriented. And then the second half, right before you menstruate, that's all progesterone. And so progesterone just really helps to modulate that kind of the uterine wall, right? And prepare for implantation. And so oftentimes PMS types of symptoms are related to estrogen dominance, or too much estrogen, not enough progesterone. And with that, we see stress being a huge factor, because when you're under a lot of stress, there's something called pregnenolone steal, where pregnenolone is a precursor for cortisol, which is your stress hormone, as well as progesterone. And when you're under a lot of stress, your body always favors basically survival, right? And reacting to the stress over producing these sex hormones and fertility. So you'll shunt, it's called pregnenolone steal, where you're going to end up producing more cortisol. So stress is a big factor, blood sugar imbalances that need to be addressed, getting the liver working better, getting the gut working better. So these are all kind of the foundational pieces that we're looking at. And Melissa, why don't you jump into some of the nutritional strategies that you like to utilize?
Yeah, so definitely look at doing an anti-inflammatory diet. And we pretty much recommend that for every condition, but it's particularly important with PMS. And like Dr. Jockers said, it's typically an estrogen dominance issue. So you'll get breast tenderness and pain related to that. So you want to make sure you're not eating or exposing yourself to like xenoestrogens, which are things that can mimic estrogen in the body. So don't drink out of a plastic water bottle is one of the main ones I see my clients doing, but because plastic acts like a xenoestrogen, so it can actually elevate estrogen in the body. And then also making sure you're getting antioxidant rich diet, tons of vegetables, leafy greens. You want to get lots of magnesium, B vitamin rich foods. B vitamins, magnesium, and vitamin D are really important for PMS symptoms. And then making sure you're getting some omega-3s. So I usually recommend salmon or other fish that are rich in high omega-3s. So those would be some of my top nutritional strategies.
Yeah, I think that's a great foundation. Tara, what do you have to add to that?
Yeah, so on top of anti-inflammatory type diet, sometimes you can do all the anti-inflammatory dieting and exercise and be right where you think you should be, but then you still have issues with estrogen dominance. And I know I experienced that in myself. I was, an athlete and everything, but DIM supplements helped a lot. Also, after you've had babies, things can sort of change in your menstrual cycles. And so when you get closer to menopause, eating a nutrition like a keto type diet and then timing it around your cycle can also be beneficial in helping in symptoms. Exercise in general and stress relief, good sleep, and hydration, just getting half of your body in ounces is really great to help during the time of your cycle.
Yeah, key. Hampton, any key nutrients, herbs that you think about when you think about PMS issues?
Sure. So just like you, I don't have direct experience, but I do have a wife, and
True.
she's tried a few things that I've researched and seem to work really well for her. So I totally agree. Magnesium is huge. She really ups her magnesium around that follicular phase, and it really helps as well. And really, like we're talking about supporting methylation, so breaking down, unused or used estrogen. So she really likes dong quai. It's an herb that really helps support that process. And then Epsom salt baths. Those seem to really support, just again, getting more magnesium in, relaxing tension, and helping the hormones process accordingly. So those are a few things that have supported her.
Yeah, for sure. And I also think about chasteberry, which is also called Vitex. It's kind of one of the most well-studied or most commonly recommended herbs as well. And you can get teas and you can get tinctures with it. Dong quai, like you talked about as well, is another good one. Ginger as well, very powerful anti-inflammatory. So, women that are out there dealing with like painful menstrual cramps, ginger root, boswellia, turmeric, those can all be real beneficial there for calming down inflammation. And omega-3 fats too. Omega-3 fats play a key role. And then we probably would say this over and over and over again, but also looking at your vitamin D levels, because there's actually correlation between women that have worsening symptoms around PMS and vitamin D deficiency. So if you're having just unbearable symptoms, there's a high likelihood that you're probably vitamin D deficient, and that may help improve the way that your immune system responds, the way that your muscles are contracting, and you may get quite a bit of relief by improving that, along with all the other benefits that vitamin D provides. So really great question. Melissa, let's go into the next one.
Okay, well, this was from Tarzan, and we answered it with some of the strategies we just discussed, but she's asking about causes of dizziness and heart palpitations only during PMS.
Yeah. So again, going back to those kinds of issues. Now, sometimes this could be related to like the cause could be different based on if it's before she menstruates and after she menstruates. Because when I start thinking about that, I think maybe she's losing a lot of blood and she's anemic, or she's mildly, she's not clinically anemic, but she's subclinically anemic, right? Meaning that it's not at the level where she would be diagnosed, but she's trending in that direction based on what we're looking at with functional labs. So, and this is very common for a lot of women where their serum ferritin will drop real low, and that's kind of your storage form of iron. And so we like to see that certainly up over 25 for women. And oftentimes it'll be, 10, 15. And most of the time these women have gotten blood work done, but their doctors have never even looked at their ferritin. They're just looking at their red blood cells or hematocrit, their hemoglobin, and they're saying, well, you're not anemic based on that. But if we're seeing that the kind of the early stage of an anemic tendency is this loss of ferritin. And I see a big correlation with a lot of these kinds of symptoms, okay, where the woman feels dizzy, they feel cold, they feel tired and fatigued, and low ferritin, kind of this trending towards anemia. So, if it's after menstruation, that'd be the first place I would look. Now, if it's before menstruation, I think it goes back to what we were talking about, where there's most likely issues going on there with estrogen dominance, right? Which can cause just more overall, can trigger a little bit more overall systemic inflammation. And that may be impacting her vascular system, causing poor circulation into her brain, which can cause more of that dizziness. So those would be kind of the two things I would look at. Do you have anything you want to add there, Melissa?
No, I think we covered that pretty well.
Yeah.
I mean, when I think of dizziness, I think of low blood sugar. So just making sure that her blood sugar is not getting too low during that time. So having a real balanced macronutrient diet, getting in plenty of healthy fats. I don't think we really stress that enough during the PMS nutritional recommendations. So avocado, olives, olive oil, those are our favorites. So other things to think about.
Yeah, for sure. Now, if she does have an anemia, Hampton, what are some things that she can do to help support that? Right? Or things that she could try, even if she hasn't had the blood testing done, to help support just overall good iron, blood flow, right? Having the right amount of blood.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I mean, eating the foods that contain good sources of iron, organ meats are a great one. Any kind of grass-fed, whole animal, red meats are good. Beets is really good. Dark leafy greens, dark green juices is really good. Get the constituents that build hemoglobin, chlorophyll. Magnesium is at the core of the green vegetables, and magnesium is a huge component. So is copper. A lot of people don't know that whole food vitamin C actually has copper atoms, and you need copper and ceruloplasmin to actually kind of drive iron with holding the oxygen into the cell to utilize it. So that's a big piece is oxygen utilization with building iron that way. So those are some things that you can do pretty easily. Yeah,
great. Anything to add to that, Tara?
Yeah, just echoing what all the other coaches have said, just supporting a lot of protein. If you're a vegetarian, that can be kind of hard. And so perhaps adding some good protein, whether it's through eggs or clean meats, and then also make sure you have good hydration during your cycle, because sometimes that can cause dizziness if your electrolytes are off and you're feeling a little more dehydrated during that time. So.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things that we teach too is also, like, most women have a lot of cravings kind of the week before menstruation. And, even though we're big advocates of a lower carb diet, and we talk a lot about intermittent fasting and things like that, that last week before menstruation, we see a lot of women do better doing less intermittent fasting, doing more feasting, eating more healthy carbs from fruit, from root vegetables, sweet potatoes, different things like that. Squashes, those can all be really, really helpful kind of that week before. And then also getting in your red meat, like grass-fed beef, things like that. So that those are the iron rich foods. And something to consider would be taking an iron supplement, particularly if you're adverse to eating a lot of red meat. You may consider doing an iron supplement. And even if you feel like you're having really heavy bleeding, taking an iron supplement can really, really help. And then, of course, we want to get to the root of the heavy bleeding, right? Now, some women just naturally bleed a little bit more than others, but in some cases, there could be cysts in there. We could be dealing with like a PCOS or endometriosis or something like that, that can be addressed with, functional health coaching, functional medicine, functional nutrition. We can get to the root cause and address those issues. Yeah. Melissa, why don't we go to the next question, unless you have anything to add to that?
No, that's great. And we've got articles on the website covering endometriosis and PCOS if anyone wants to dig in a little deeper with those. So, okay, the next question is from Dorothy. And Dorothy has type 1 diabetes. She says her body temperature dysregulation she's experienced for 2 years. Anytime she gets cold or a chill or goes out in the air that's windy or chilly, she gets a low-grade fever and her blood sugar goes up. She says she's always cold and wakes up at 11 p.m. and can't normally sleep till around 1 to 2 a.m. Any ideas?
Well, the fact that she's got type 1 diabetes, which is an autoimmune condition, these kind of autoimmune conditions, although there's a genetic component, oftentimes are triggered by issues with leaky gut and issues with systemic infections, right? And so certainly possible that she has got some issues going on as far as parasites or bacterial overgrowth in her gut, possibly viral infections that, there's a lot of links between certain types of viruses and their impact on the pancreas, destroying those beta cells in the pancreas, causing type 1 diabetes. So there's most likely an underlying immune suppressive effect that's also impacting her hypothalamus and pituitary gland, which is kind of the regulation center for her temperature, right? And we see this often, and it can cause issues with, possibly poor circulation, reacting to stress effectively. A lot of times people with kind of this, I kind of term it like a neuroendocrine inflammation, where it's kind of impacting the nervous system, the part of the nervous system that coordinates the hormones. So it's the hypothalamus and pituitary gland. We'll see like dizziness when standing up, right? Fatigue a lot of times, right? These are some of the common symptoms. Feeling cold often. These are common symptoms with that. So, some things certainly that can improve would be just regular movement, exercise, but, not overdoing it, really trying to prioritize good sleep, stress management. This is just kind of like foundational things, but a lot of times people that have these kind of conditions, they're not moving enough either. So getting out, getting some regular exercise would be helpful. Of course, type 1 diabetes, you really have to monitor your blood sugar. That's so important to make sure it's not dropping too low, not going up too high, and modulating your insulin dosage. And that's another important factor is, ideally through nutrition and lifestyle, which I'll let the rest of you guys talk about, we're doing everything we can to help you only have to use the lowest amount of insulin possible. You don't want to just be slamming insulin into your system, because that's going to drive up systemic inflammation in your body. So, Melissa, what do you have to add to that?
Yeah, so with the body temperature dysregulation and feeling cold all the time, I always think thyroid. And, a lot of times if you have one autoimmune condition, you're more susceptible to another. So I suggest getting your thyroid tested and make sure they test your thyroid antibodies, just to rule that out. And then with waking up and not being able to sleep, so many people have issues with sleep, and sleep is just so critical to our overall health. And so check blood sugar imbalances can often wake people up. One of the main causes I see of people waking up like in the middle of the night is their blood sugar is actually dropping too low. So trying to balance the blood sugar during the day with a healthy diet, have plenty of healthy fats, and and I know being type 1, I've got personal experience with that. I have a close family member with that. So I understand that it's hard. It's hard to regulate that, but optimizing nutrition is really key. I've seen my family member really improve his not needing as much insulin during the day, not needing as much of his 24-hour insulin at night, but just making sure he's getting in a very healthy diet. It's a plant-rich diet full of healthy fats. So those would be some suggestions I would have.
Yeah, great suggestions. Hampton, what would you add to that there?
Yeah, I'll tag on to that. That's what I was thinking, is thyroid as well, autoimmune, and then moving to thyroid temperature dysregulation. And so, of course, the nutrients, zinc, selenium, iodine, magnesium, retinol is really huge. A lot of people don't know retinol is a big part of forming thyroid hormone. You got to have that in the mix, get that from the diet. And then definitely prioritizing sleep, trying to not eat 2 to 3 hours before bed. And I've had a few people have added a little bit extra quality fat to their last meal, and that's really seemed to help with sleep and staying asleep and regulating blood sugar as well. That's been a little tip that I've had some success with people, so that might be worth exploring as well.
Yeah, that's good. And Tara, how about you?
Yeah, I'll also echo those words. And then I just felt when I read her story that perhaps which came first, she's having trouble sleeping, and then in the daytime it's causing problems. And so it's with the being cold and so which came first? And I would say if she could prioritize looking at her sleep, taking baby steps to make a priority for sleep, I would say that would probably help with some of her daytime issues. It also helps with your controlling your diet, because when you're tired, it's harder. You don't make as good of choices in your eating, or you don't feel like exercising because don't feel well when you don't sleep. And so I would prioritize that. And then just echoing an anti-inflammatory diet, and like Hampton said, adding either fat, or even sometimes people can do some good carbs, not processed foods, but like some root vegetables, or in their evening meal to kind of help sustain their blood sugar over the evening time.
Yeah, it's also important. And then also, helping your body be able to run off ketones as well. So putting some MCT, particularly C8 MCT oil, which is caprylic acid, in your meals, like a teaspoon with each meal. You can go up to a tablespoon. I always recommend starting with about a half a teaspoon or a teaspoon, just to make sure you don't get, if you take in too much MCT oil too quickly, you get diarrhea pants, right? So you want to avoid that. So start slowly, but start implementing that into your meals. And that turns almost immediately into ketones in your system, which will provide this alternative fuel source for your brain, because it's really your brain that gives you this alertness when blood sugar is dropping too low and it feels like, okay, I don't have enough fuel here. And so now it turns on the alarm, which can cause you to wake up, like Melissa was saying there. So providing some MCTs in there will help your body utilize your own body fat, will actually teach your body to use ketones as a fuel source. There are also things like exogenous ketone supplements that a lot of people with type 1 diabetes actually see good results with, for helping improve the ability to use ketones as a fuel source. Right now, the key is you just got to make sure that you're, making sure, and you probably are checking your blood sugar, making sure it's not getting up too high, too low. But utilizing some of these tools as well will really, really help as far as providing this alternative fuel source, so your brain doesn't freak out just in case your blood sugar starts creeping lower. Right? Your body's good at, saying, okay, well, blood sugar is going down. Let's tap into our own body fat, produce these ketones, and now we're good. Right? And that'll sustain us. So good, Melissa, let's move on to the next question.
Okay. Diana is asking, she's suddenly losing lots of hair and her inflammatory markers are high.
Yeah. So whenever I think about hair loss, I think three major causes. Okay. The first thing that I think about is thyroid under conversion or underproduction. So it could be clinical hypothyroidism or a functional hypothyroidism, where your levels aren't at the point where they would be diagnosed, but you're just not getting enough active thyroid hormone to the cellular level. And thyroid hormone is critical for the maturation of the hair follicles. So that's kind of the first thing. And one of the things I look at is the outer third of the eyebrows. It's kind of classic for hypothyroidism and this is different than other forms of hair loss. In some cases, it's different, is that you lose that outer third of the eyebrow. So if you're noticing that the outer third of the eyebrow is kind of fading away, definitely get a full thyroid analysis, looking at thyroid antibodies, particularly TPO and TG, thyroglobulin antibodies, as well as your free T3. Okay, so you want to look at your T4, your free T3. That's the actual component that's interacting with the cell. So I would definitely look at that. Second major thing is women, as they're going through perimenopause and into menopause, if they have just an overall underproduction of estrogen and progesterone, that can also cause issues there, because that's also very important for fullness, thickness of hair, maturation of the hair follicle. We have to have enough estrogen, progesterone for that. So we've got to look at those hormones. If you're under a lot of stress, maybe your body, again, is shunting and producing all this stress hormone, not enough sex hormone. And then number three is autoimmunity to the hair follicle, right? Where you actually have an autoimmune condition where your immune system is attacking and destroying the hair follicles. So when I'm thinking about what the cause is, I'm trying to figure out which of those three, or maybe it's a combination, that are contributing to that. And then we got to go into the solutions. So Melissa, I'll let you start with that.
Yeah. So, well, the inflammation piece is also important, because she said that her inflammatory markers are high. So we've got to figure out what is causing that. What's that? And we don't know which marker she's talking about, but what's causing that overactive response, that inflammatory response. So, with hair loss and with inflammatory markers being high, I think about blood sugar imbalances. Are there environmental toxins impacting you? Have you or a new area, that maybe a new home with new furniture that's off-gassing, you just change the carpet, things like that can actually cause high levels of inflammation. So, and then also looking at chronic infections. Is there, gut infections are really common cause of inflammation. So I would dig deeper just to try to understand and identify what is causing the inflammation. And that may be the key to understanding what's causing the hair loss.
Yeah, so important. We got to get to the root cause. Hampton, what do you have to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think that's great. You got to, sift through a lot of that to really dive deep. But, what comes to mind here too is really nourishing and resting and really wanting to get that inflammation down, whether that's, chemical, microbial, emotional. I just think that could be something that's often overlooked, is really just maybe, I know we talk a lot about great fasting protocols and different things to get into autophagy, but really just, building in the nutrition, resting, reducing that inflammation from every, each angle, whichever one they might be, can be really good, and just grounding. And of course, the core tenets we always talk about of sunlight in the eyes, grounding, hydration, but just really getting the nutrients in to support the system, to increase the metabolism, to support thyroid function. Just in general, I would guess it's probably under functioning. We could probably assume that to some degree. So that would be just some things I would add from lifestyle coaching aspect.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Tara, what would you have to add to that?
Yeah, so I always like to look also in those realms of the micronutrients, and you can either do a test to make sure you have or are processing all your micronutrients, and then also supporting with either zinc or like B7 is good for hair, and also good diet, removing processed foods, adding good fats like we've been talking about, and increasing protein for to support your hair, eggs and bone broth. Collagen is always a good one, or even a collagen powder to help support good, healthy hair.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah, got to get to the root cause. I think that's really what it comes down to. And I kind of scratched the surface. So those are kind of the three main root causes, but underneath those, you have a whole wide variety of root causes that can actually cause the thyroid, the functional low thyroid, right? Mold, right? It could be chemical toxicity. It could be chronic stress. It could be gut infections, right? So we have to start to kind of go through these layers and try to figure out, how to best address those. But I think we gave a really great foundation, places to start, things to start doing, kind of that low hanging fruit, try to get your body moving in the right direction. Mm-hmm. All right, Melissa, let's go to the next question.
Okay, awesome. So Brenda is asking about rosacea. She would like to know how to treat the underlying cause rather than just treating the skin with an antibiotic.
That's really great. And so whenever I think about rosacea, I think about the gut-skin connection. Okay, there's almost always issues going on there with the gut. In particular, a lot of links with H. pylori overgrowth in the stomach. And H. pylori is a type of bacteria that lives in the stomach, right? And it's a native to the stomach. However, it should be in a very small population. And so as it starts to overgrow, it shuts down your ability to produce stomach acid. And if you can't produce stomach acid, now you can't sterilize your food. You can't break down protein, absorb certain minerals effectively. And it also creates a lot more inflammation in the stomach and throughout the body. And so typically with rosacea, I'm thinking something tends to be more in the upper gut. So it's usually either H. pylori or a bacterial overgrowth in the small intestine. And also on top of that, there's oftentimes histamine issues where the body's not degrading histamine, whether it's not breaking it down or it's overproducing histamine. Sometimes there's some histamine producing bacteria that are overgrowing, like Klebsiella, for example. So these are all things that we've got to look at, but it's typically, I'm thinking gut skin connection. What would you add to that, Melissa?
Yeah, definitely agree with that. This is when I have clients with skin issues, I tell them it's a window into the gut. So the skin's a window into the gut. And so I usually recommend some type of stool testing so that we can look for any type of infections that may be contributing. And then another major cause that I see are food sensitivity. So in addition to the histamine intolerance, other food sensitivities that they aren't aware of, dairy's a big culprit with skin issues. So I would recommend doing some testing so that you can identify what are the underlying causes.
Yeah, that's great. Hampton, what would you add to that?
I echo all that. I think about the gastrolymphatic, so the lymphatics that it ties into the gut and that it's then into the circulatory system in the skin. So some herbs that I like is we have a great Micro Formulas has a great lymphatic support product with rhubarb in there. I like burdock root, dandelion. Those are going to support skin, lymph, and liver, kidney function. Again, if they do testing and there's issues going in the gut, you know, infections and things, you can use some antimicrobial herbs. We've got some formulas there, but we'll have oregano and what's the Digest Clear? Is that the product, Dr. Jockers, that you have?
GI Clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have the GI Clear.
That's a good one. It's got a good combination of things in there, berberine as well.
Yeah.
So I think those would be some good herbs that you could try if you did find out there's some gut infection going on.
Yeah, great. And Tara, what would you add to that?
Oh yeah, I see food sensitivities being an issue, and it is genetic, and so you can only work with you can't change your genetics, but you can change your environment. So it triggers that can cause rosacea, stress, heat, spicy foods. You can look at those, and then also different foods that trigger it. You can either do a food sensitivity test or keep a journal so that you can see when you're having skin issues. What did you eat in the last 72 hours that could have caused that? And then perhaps looking at eliminating dairy, gluten, sometimes nightshades or histamine type foods.
Yeah, exactly. So when we're thinking about histamine type foods, some of those are even very healthy foods like avocados, apple cider vinegar, bone broth, things that normally we would tell people definitely be consuming these. But for some individuals, if they're not degrading histamine well, they need to come off of these at least for a short period of time and see how they respond. So I would triage with the diet. I would say, okay, number one, make sure you're off processed sugars, processed grains, refined vegetable oils, all the corn oil, soybean, safflower, cottonseed, all those kinds of toxic oils. Come off of all of those. Really try to stick to kind of a whole foods, real food-based diet and see if you notice change. If you're not, now we start taking out dairy for sure. Possibly eggs, right? Can also be a trigger. All grains, right? So take out some things like that, and see if you're noticing improvement there. And if not, then we start going even deeper, right? Try taking out nightshade vegetables. Try taking out nuts and seeds, and see if you're noticing improvement, right? So you can kind of triage it like that. Meanwhile, if you're just not seeing any change with this, I would definitely recommend working with a functional health coach. We've got 3 great ones right here that can help you get to the root cause. Because sometimes, in some cases, these are easy, simple, nutrition changes, lifestyle changes. But so often people have been struggling for a long time and they're never able to get to the root cause. And they're on these, very restricted diets, or they're, just playing a guessing game, but they're not really getting anywhere. And oftentimes because there's root cause infections that are not being uprooted and addressed, or there's chronic toxicities that need to be addressed. And that's where these functional health coaches can really help you. So let's move into the next question.
Awesome. So Kristen's asking about adrenal fatigue. Well, she says adrenal failure. She wants to know if intermittent fasting is okay for one struggling with adrenal failure, and the best lifestyle strategies for those with adrenal issues, chronic stress, and low DHEA.
Yeah. So, if I think about adrenal failure, it really depends on her symptoms and stuff, but I would think it's super hard for her to get out of bed. She has no energy throughout the day, super fatigued, may even be having a lot of trouble sleeping at night. Some people with adrenal issues just need like 13, 14 hours of sleep. Some people, they can't even sleep at night. So they're just wired and tired. So with that sort of individual, we want to just implement very, very tiny pieces of stressors of hormetic stressors. Fasting is a hormetic stressor. So it's a stressor on the body, but it's a stressor that actually can make us stronger as long as we can recover from it. But in general, first thing we got to do is address whatever the major stressors are, right? So before we think about fasting, we want to think about, okay, are you in a job you absolutely hate that you're going to every single day? Or are you having significant relational issues? Or are you in a house that's full of mold that you're breathing in? So we need to figure out what's at the root of the adrenal failure and do our best to eliminate or at least minimize, reduce exposure to that. And then from there, we can start really stacking some of these hormetic stressors, right? With fasting, we want to be real careful with that. So it depends on the individual, how well they're sleeping. If they're sleeping pretty well, then we can do a 12, maybe even a 14-hour fast in the morning and consume our meals in like a 10-hour, 12-hour window. That's a really good place to start. Okay. And we start getting some movement, some gentle movement, going out for a walk, things like that. And so we kind of just gradually, we lean into these things rather than aggressively implement these things. But the first thing we have to do is try to reduce exposure to the major, stressors that are driving the adrenals to be so exhausted, or the body to just not be able to produce energy. Melissa, what would you add to that?
Right. So this was my issue when I went through my health issues. So I'm very aware of how chronic stress can impact that. It's really the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis and cause dysfunction and lead to low DHEA. So it affects your hormones, not just DHEA. It affects your estrogen, testosterone. So there's a lot of downstream effects from having this dysfunction. And chronic stress is usually that underlying issue. So definitely addressing that. But with diet, particularly, make sure you're not being too restrictive with diet, particularly carbohydrates. So with people with adrenal issues, I definitely recommend having moderate amounts of healthy carbs like sweet potatoes and root vegetables, because you don't want to be too restrictive with carbohydrates and cause more stress on the body and lower blood sugar. So we really need to focus on balancing blood sugar, having plenty of healthy fats. Don't overdo exercise, like let it be a time of rest. A lot of time adrenal issues come from type A people who are pushing. And so they're over exercising, they're not prioritizing sleep. And this is the time where you've really got to give yourself permission to rest. So permission to get in bed early and prioritize sleep, and then not overdo exercise. Get out in nature, get sun on your face, go for walks. I'm not saying not to do anything, definitely move, but no high intensity exercise until you're feeling better. And that's once you're feeling better, then you can implement strategies like intermittent fasting and more exercise just to help with the recovery. But balancing blood sugar would probably be one of the key nutritional strategies. So just make sure you're getting healthy fats, plenty of healthy carbohydrates, and then good sources of protein.
Yeah, really good. Hampton, what are your thoughts on this?
Thoughts? I think minerals comes to mind. So of course, sodium, and not just sodium only, but sodium chloride with all the 84 trace minerals. You need trace minerals to activate all the enzymes in the body. Sodium, potassium is really important for fluid regulation in the body. Magnesium is huge. Hair mineral analysis, there's certain ratios of minerals, and I believe it's the sodium magnesium ratio speaks to adrenal function. And so prioritizing getting magnesium in, those are all really critical. And so there's a drink that I really like. There's a lot of different variations of it, but it's really getting in a half a teaspoon of Celtic sea salt or pink Himalayan salt, and putting in some whole food vitamin C, because vitamin C and B vitamins are also really supportive for adrenal hormone production as well, and balancing. And so doing that in the morning, 16 to 30 ounces, however much you can kind of get in, and then doing it again in the afternoon, that can be a really good stabilizing, energizing way to keep mineralization in and support hormones and enzymes that way with the adrenal glands as well.
Yeah, that's great. And oftentimes people with adrenal issues, they're really craving salts. Okay. That's a common issue, right? They're really, really craving these salts because their body needs that. So Tara, what do you have to add to that?
Yeah, everything that the coaches have talked about so far is so great. And the thing I usually talk to particularly women when they have adrenal fatigue is I say, what is the one thing that you love to do? And do that and make priority to find time to either include prayer or meditation, yoga. Usually those are things that are resonating with them at this point in their life. And so prioritizing good sleep and things that they love to do, whatever it is, whether it's hiking or yoga. And then some women have a good response to waking up in the morning and going outside, getting sunlight early, and even using some spectrum lighting. And then in the evening, kind of dimming the lights and preparing yourself to bed and prioritizing sleep.
Yeah, that's so good. So important to get that good quality sleep. So having good sleep hygiene, super important. And grounding your body. I think a couple of you guys mentioned that, just getting out barefoot, grass, dirt, sand, grounding your body. You'll get the free electrons from the ground. And that actually, it's almost like showering your electromagnetic field. So we're all around kind of dirty EMFs just coming from our computers and cell phones and stuff like that. So showering that electromagnetic field on a regular basis by getting grounded can be really helpful. And then also adaptogenic herbs can be really helpful here as well. I know ashwagandha, lots of clinical research on it. A lot of people seem to do very, very well on ashwagandha. There's also, and ashwagandha is more of a calming herb, although a lot of people do also notice that they just feel like they've got better endurance and stamina, throughout the day with it. And then you've got some herbs that are tend to be more known for being energizing. That would be things like rhodiola, eleuthero, which is Siberian ginseng, Panax ginseng in general is another great one kind of for energizing. So you typically don't want to take those in the evening, although they're not stimulants like caffeine. You're probably going to get your best benefit taking those earlier in the day. And then in the evening, you have things that are more calming that are agonists for the GABA pathways to help calm your brain. So you have things like lemongrass, passion flower, valerian root, lavender, right? Things like that. And you can use essential oils. You can diffuse essential oils, so you're breathing them in. You can do herbal teas with these. You can do supplements that, either have some of these herbs in isolation or in combination. And those adaptogenic herbs really help kind of, basically, if your body is underproducing energy, they're going to help bring you up. If you're overproducing, or if you're feeling anxiety or irritable, they're going to help bring you back into balance. They can all be helpful. And then one other thing, I think about is, typically anytime somebody's dealing with adrenal issues, it's usually, we call it the cell danger response. So the body's actually creating a response where it is shutting down energy production because it's trying to survive. It's almost going into hibernation because there's so much toxicity, infection, or trauma that's taking place. And we need to kind of peel back the onions. We need to remove as much of the infection or the toxicity. We need to start to remove the source of that and the trauma before, and that could be emotional trauma, certainly could be physical trauma as well, before the cell itself is going to wake up, okay, and start to produce energy the way that it should. Now, the adaptogens, those kind of herbs, these types of nutrients all really help. They really help the body, but, we always have to get to the root cause and address that there. So,
yeah.
Well, good. We're running late on time here. But guys, we went through a lot of questions. We'll do another monthly Q&A and go through more. If you guys are dealing with chronic health issues and you want to improve your health, or you're just looking to optimize your health, you want to get some lab work run, look at your inflammatory markers, look at your vitamin D levels, look at all those types of things, your blood sugar, your fasting insulin, then reach out to one of our health coaches here. We've got Melissa, Tara, and Hampton. They're amazing. Work with people all over the world, and they'd be happy to help guide you and help set up a customized health plan to help you reach your goals. So don't be shy, reach out to them. They'll help support you in whatever way they're able to. And guys, we'll see you on a future podcast. And also, if you're listening to this on YouTube, If you have questions that you want us to address on future podcasts, future Q&As, go ahead and leave them in the comments, and I'll go back and we'll grab those and answer those in a future podcast. And also be sure to follow me on social media, on Instagram and Facebook, because every month I put up a post asking for your questions so we can address them in this Q&A. So be sure to do that. We'll see you guys in a future podcast. Everybody be blessed.